Financial advice that truly stands the test of time is rarely exciting, rarely new, and almost never optimized for speed. In fact, the advice that endures often sounds so obvious that it is dismissed by beginners and rediscovered only after painful experience. When you examine the lives and writings of financial legends across centuries, a clear pattern emerges. Timeless advice survives not because markets stay the same, but because human behavior does. Fear, greed, impatience, and overconfidence repeat reliably, even as technology instruments and platforms evolve. The advice that lasts is advice designed to work despite these weaknesses, not because people overcome them. One of the most enduring pieces of financial advice is protect your downside first. From Benjamin Graham to Warren Buffett, this principle appears in different language, but with identical intent. The idea is simple. It is far easier to recover from a missed opportunity than from a permanent loss. Markets will always offer new chances, but lost capital and broken confidence are much harder to rebuild. This advice persists because it is grounded in survival, not optimism. Over centuries of booms and busts, those who focused first on avoiding ruin consistently outlasted those who chased maximum upside. Closely related is the timeless advice to avoid leverage unless you deeply understand it. Every major financial crisis has featured leverage as an accelerant. Leverage magnifies outcomes, but it also compresses time. It turns learning mistakes into existential threats. Financial legends who used leverage successfully did so sparingly and late after building deep experience and robust risk controls. The advice endures because leverage does not care about intelligence, conviction, or good intentions. It only cares about volatility, and volatility eventually arrives. Another piece of advice that refuses to age is, stay within your circle of competence. Popularized by Buffett and Munger, but practiced long before them, this principle recognizes a hard truth. You do not need to understand everything to succeed financially, but you must understand what you engage with. Markets punish false confidence far more harshly than ignorance. This advice remains valid because complexity continues to seduce people into believing they know more than they do. Limiting decisions to areas of genuine understanding reduces self-deception, which is one of the most expensive behaviors in finance. Patience is another form of advice that survives every era. Long-term investors from John D. Rockefeller to modern fund managers emphasize waiting, not trading. Markets reward patience unevenly, which is why it is so difficult to practice. Long stretches of boredom are followed by brief periods of outsized reward. Most people abandon the process during the boring phases. The advice to do nothing most of the time has survived precisely because it contradicts human impulse. Markets change. Impatience does not. Equally timeless is the advice to separate behavior from outcome. Financial legends repeatedly warn against judging decisions solely by short-term results. Good decisions can lose money. Bad decisions can make money temporarily. When people conflate outcome with skill, learning stops. This advice persists because markets are probabilistic systems, not moral scorecards. Those who survived long enough to matter learn to evaluate decisions by process and risk alignment rather than immediate reward. Another enduring principle is simplicity. Over time, the tools of finance have grown more complex, but the advice has moved in the opposite direction. Legendary investors consistently simplify as they gain experience. Fewer positions, clearer rules, less noise. Simplicity reduces error under stress and makes discipline easier to maintain. This advice survives because complexity multiplies failure points, and failure points compound, just as relentlessly as returns. Finally, one of the most timeless pieces of financial advice is time is your greatest ally if you don't interrupt it. Compounding works only when it is allowed to continue. Panic selling, overtrading, and lifestyle inflation all interrupt time's work. Financial legends structured their lives to stay invested financially and psychologically. This advice has survived because time remains the only force in finance that consistently rewards good behavior without requiring genius. One of the biggest reasons timeless advice fails in practice is success itself. Early wins create a dangerous illusion that rules are no longer necessary. Financial legends repeatedly warned that the most expensive mistakes often come after periods of strong performance. Confidence turns into overconfidence. Discipline loosens. Risk expands quietly. This is why enduring figures treated success as a warning sign, not a reward. They tightened standards after good years, reviewed assumptions more aggressively, and resisted the urge to press harder. The advice to stay humble did not exist for beginners. It existed for winners. Another reason timeless advice is ignored is social pressure. Markets do not operate in isolation. They exist inside cultures that reward speed, visibility, and comparison. Patience looks like incompetence. Simplicity looks like ignorance. Caution looks like fear. Financial legends learn to withstand looking wrong for long periods. Buffett underperformed during tech manias. Graham looked outdated during bubbles. Yet they held firm because they understood a painful truth: markets punish conformity during extremes. The advice that survives time requires the emotional strength to stand alone without immediate validation. There is also the challenge of boredom. Timeless advice often demands long stretches of inactivity. Do nothing. Wait. Hold. Review. These behaviors offer no dopamine, no applause, no story to tell. Most people abandon good processes, not because they fail, but because they are dull. Financial legends built lives that could tolerate boredom. They filled waiting time with reading, thinking, and reflection. This made patience sustainable. Without such structure, timeless advice collapses under the weight of human restlessness. Another subtle enemy of timeless advice is lifestyle inflation. As wealth grows fixed, costs grow with it. Bigger homes' commitments and expectations reduce flexibility. Suddenly, patience becomes unaffordable. Risk must be taken to sustain lifestyle. Financial legends who endured kept their personal lives simple relative to their wealth. Buffett's modest lifestyle is not eccentricity, it is risk management. The advice to live below your means survives time because it preserves optionality. And optionality is the fuel of good decision-making. Timeless advice also demands memory. Something markets constantly try to erase. Every cycle convinces participants that the old rules no longer apply. This time is different returns with new language, new technology, and new confidence. Financial legends remembered past cycles vividly. They remembered how optimism felt before collapse and how fear felt before recovery. This memory anchored behavior. Without memory, people relearn the same lessons at higher cost. This is why studying history remains one of the most enduring pieces of advice in finance. Perhaps the hardest aspect of timeless advice is separating identity from outcomes. When people tie self-worth to portfolio performance, advice becomes negotiable. Loss feels like failure. Gain feels like validation. This emotional fusion makes consistency impossible. Financial legends trained themselves to judge behavior, not results. This allowed them to stay aligned, even when markets misbehaved. The advice to stay rational survives time because it is fundamentally advice about protecting identity from volatility. When you step back, a striking realization emerges. Timeless financial advice has not survived because it is optimal in theory, but because it is defensive against human weakness. It assumes you will feel fear, greed, boredom, and pride. It does not ask you to eliminate these emotions. It asks you to design your life so they have less power. And this is where the story truly resolves. Financial advice that stands the test of time is not about mastering markets. It is about mastering behavior. Markets evolve. Instruments change. Platforms come and go. Human nature remains remarkably stable. The advice that endures is advice that works even when you are not at your best. Those who internalize these principles do not become extraordinary overnight. In fact, they often look ordinary for years. But over long horizons, they become difficult to compete with, not because they are smarter, but because they are harder to knock off course. They survive when others reset. They stay patient when others rush. They compound when others interrupt. This is the quiet power of timeless financial advice. It does not promise excitement. It promises durability. And in a world obsessed with speed and novelty, durability is the rarest and most valuable edge of all.